All right, everyone, welcome to the first rendition of Brothers and Boss Battles bonus levels, an offshoot from our regular podcast. In these bonus levels episodes, we'll take a lighter look at video games and do a bunch of fun stuff. We'll do rankings and lists and talk broadly about video games in fun little scenarios. As usual, I'm Anthony and my brothers, Pete and Tom, are here. We are the brothers in Brothers and Boss Battles. Check out our regular podcast, Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Today, for our initial bonus levels episode, we will be ranking our top 10 games we think of when we think of the Sony PlayStation, which released in Japan in December 1994 and then in North America in September 1995. All right, guys, this should be a fun little rankings list that we've put together. We actually don't know each other's answers, so we'll be just as surprised as the listeners are. Um, all right. So when you think of the PlayStation 1, the first PlayStation, just really called PlayStation, not PlayStation 1, what do you think of? Tom, why don't you start us off? What's your number 10?
Yeah, so my number 10 is CTR, Crash Team Racing.
Ooh, good
Okay.
one.
I did not have that on my list.
I didn't have that on my list either. I that was on like my long list. It's sort of in my honorable mentions, but what does
So,
the PlayStation 1 make you think of Crash Team
Yeah,
Racing?
that's a good question. Well, this was one, so us three growing up together, we played a bunch of multiplayer games using the PlayStation 1's multi-tap thing, uh, peripheral.
and
Yeah, this
that
was,
and that fake red control.
yeah, that was the one without the dual shock.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we played the heck out of this one. With the four box split screen with one empty box. And yeah, I just when I was thinking of PS1, like a lot of multiplayer games kind of came to mind, and this was one of the lesser ones, but still a good game that we spent a lot of time with.
All right. And along that uh, route, and it will probably come as a surprise to many, but I actually had Crash Bandicoot as my number 10. The actual Crash Bandicoot game.
The
Yeah.
original.
The original, yeah.
I had that one a little lower on the list.
Yeah.
I actually had a different Crash Bandicoot game in addition to
Hmm.
Crash Team Racing somewhere else on the list.
That's interesting. Why overlook Crash Bandicoot 1? The first Crash Bandicoot game.
More just because of
Like,
personal
yeah.
experience with the game.
Gotcha. All right, Pete, what was your number 10? And I just so everyone knows, like, I don't know what you guys did. I basically just wrote down as I thought of them. So, like, the first one I wrote down will be my number one, and then scaled backwards. So, and I think
Basically,
that's,
like whatever popped into your head.
yeah, because that's what you think of PlayStation. So that's kind of what I did.
I think that was part of my methodology, but I was also a little bit more systematic about it, maybe
Yeah,
like thinking about it a little more.
I think especially with ordering them, I actually like it wasn't just the first one that popped into my head was
Mm.
number one. Like that was kind of what I used to get the games down into like a longer list, but then I did some reordering.
Yeah. All right. So my number 10. So Tom, you mentioned Crash Team Racing because we played it a lot. My number 10 game actually we didn't play very much at all, and that is Tekken 3. So I think we only had, or I don't think we own this game, Tekken,
Yeah, I don't
but it
think
was
so.
on, I'm pretty sure it was on the demo disc that came with our version of the PlayStation.
You guys love this demo disc. I feel it's come up in the regular episodes quite a few times.
I did love that. I remember popping it in a lot.
We we
But
had
anyway,
Tek-
so
we
I
had
just,
Tek-
we did
we had Tekken 3.
Tekken 3. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's
okay.
the one he mentioned.
Yeah. And for some reason, Tekken is like obviously a series that has many iterations and has persisted over the years, but in my little world, kind of Tekken 3 is like kind of where it stopped. Like that is like Tekken for me. And I still remember like the cover art and stuff. So anyway, that's
Yeah,
number 3 for me. I mean number 10 for me.
that's a good call. I remember we played that at a friend's house, and they had some
Yeah.
like very memorable characters. There was the little gecko. I think his name was Gone.
Yeah. No, it's a cool game.
Yeah, that wasn't on my list either. All right, number 9. This I doubt will be on either of your lists, but I'm a fan of this series in general. And for some reason, I just always think of this game when I think of the PlayStation, and that's Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. which wasn't a great game, but
Certainly not on my list.
yeah, but I love Star Wars, and um, we had that game, and for some reason, I just sort of always remembered playing it with those sort of not great graphics, and yeah, it was fun though. Tracked the movie pretty well.
Yeah, all right. I mean, I know you're a much bigger Star Wars fan in general than I am, at least. All right, I'll go next with my number 9. So we liked wrestling a lot, and we played a lot of wrestling video games. And I was debating a little bit about which one should be included on the list. But I have to say, when I think of PlayStation 1, I most often or most vividly think of WWF Warzone.
Oh wow. So that was one of them that I didn't know if you guys would have, and I have that way down on my list.
Oh wow, okay, okay. Yeah, so that was kind of the first one,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess. At
I
least
rem
of like
yeah, I remember they had that create a wrestler mode, and I would like create my high school teachers.
yeah, yeah. And I think was that the game that we created like Mark McGuire and
Yeah,
like
I
yeah,
think
we
so.
yeah,
And like my friends were really into it too, so I had it like from all ends. I was like
right.
playing that game.
Yeah. I remember going online on like I don't know, GameFAQs or whatever it was, and they had the I don't know, procedure, whatever you want to call it, to make certain,
Hmm.
famous celebrity creator wrestlers like Mark McGuire.
Yeah. All right.
And it's funny because like I think the three of us played the later games more, like Attitude and SmackDown. But to me, this one just stands out in my memory the most, probably because it was the first one.
Yeah.
And also I'm not going to measure the cover art for every single one of my games, but I also remember this one with like Stone Cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Tom.
For number 9, I actually alluded to it earlier, but I put Crash Bandicoot 2 for this
Oh, okay.
slot. And yeah, like I mentioned before, this one, I mean, this was the first Crash Bandicoot game that we owned, and I remember just like playing through the levels a lot and finding all the hidden gems and all that stuff. So it really
Hmm.
sticks with me.
Yeah, I feel like we really like you really like completed games back then. Not you, but like just in general.
Yeah, I remember there was a little because we used to get those Game Pro magazines, and they had like a little insert
Mm.
for this game specifically that like revealed some of the secret areas and stuff. That was cool.
All right, Tom, why don't you keep talking and give us your number 8?
Yeah, so 8, I actually going back to wrestling. So I was thinking about it too so I narrowed it down between Warzone and Attitude, but I ended up settling on Attitude, which was the sequel to Warzone.
Hmm.
I feel like this one was just I don't know. I seem to remember playing this one more, and because it was a sequel, it was
It had improvements.
yeah, considering it's
Yeah,
like
it had a bigger
like a,
roster.
like a
Yeah.
sports game, so it's like generally the sequels are improvements and better than their predecessors in general. Not always, but
All
Yeah,
right.
and like I said, I think we played that one more than Warzone, so I can
yeah,
understand why you selected
yeah.
that one.
Do you happen to remember now that we're on the topic? Was Warzone more than 2 players, or was it only
I
two?
believe it was 4 players.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I wasn't sure if they added the third and fourth player in Attitude, or that was there the whole along.
All right, Pete, where should I go? Oh, we're not like doing a true snake kind of a thing, are we?
We'll
I
have to
mean,
do a true snake. All right, I'll go. This one I think maybe will surprise you. I don't know, but I have Gex Enter the Gecko. So that was Gex 2.
yes,
Uh,
not on my list, I will admit.
yeah, I'm not surprised.
Nice.
I don't think I played that game.
I think this might have been like the first kind of like true modern type 3D platformer that I ever played. Um,
Right?
and I
Because
don't
we,
know. I just always think of Gex in general when I'm thinking of the early, PlayStation days. And maybe it's just like the mascot. It's kind of like a cutesy mascot, but like with some attitude. I don't know.
Yeah, he was funny. That was a
Yeah,
good call. He, I thought of it too, Gax, but it didn't quite make my list. But it was
okay,
something that I did think of in my
yeah. And
head.
I remember we played 3, and then I don't know if we had one or if we just like rented it from Blockbuster or something.
Yeah,
Gex one,
yeah, we bought it, but yeah, it
okay,
wasn't. It was more like a 2D.
2D. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway, all right, Ant.
yeah,
What's your
my
eight?
number 8 is something that is probably way further down on both of your lists, and I'm not. I like this game. I'm not the hugest fan of it, but it definitely makes me think of PlayStation. Uh, or I think of this game when I think of PlayStation, and it is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Like 1 or 2 or 3
Oh,
or
one, but one and or two.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of lumping them together, but
That is further down my list.
Yeah,
Well,
you guys really
mine
liked
as
it.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys liked it way more than me, but just seeing you play it and just, all of the hype around that at the time really kind of coincided with PlayStation.
All right, Ant, do you want to keep talking?
Yeah, sure. Now this one is was big for all of us. I would be surprised if it's not on your lists, but my number 7 is Twisted Metal 2.
I have some representation for the Twisted Metal series and somewhere in my list as well.
Oh,
I
but
also
not
have representation that is not Twisted Metal 2 on my list.
I don't know. I just thought Twisted Metal 2 is when it really started getting good. One was kind of bad, but two started its good run. And I
Yeah,
don't know.
and
I just I
that was the
just kind
first Twisted Metal that we owned, I think, Twisted Metal
yeah,
2.
yeah,
Yeah. Twisted Metal 2, I believe, is only
two
two
players.
players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got that like the same Christmas that we got the PlayStation. So
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the first games we had.
it's a good call,
Yeah, for
definitely.
sure. For sure.
All right, next. Or your guy's number 7.
I'll go. So this was a struggle for me, but I put Final Fantasy 9 here.
Good game.
Very
I
good.
have Final Fantasy representation on my list, but it's not 9 and it's
I
way
have
further down.
I have
I
more
also
Final
have representation that isn't mine.
I have I have more representation that is 9 as well.
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean I'm a huge fan of the series. I mean especially back, those PlayStation 1 days in my opinion are really the heyday of the series.
Mhm.
And I honestly go back and forth between 9 and another game as being my favorite in the entire series. Um,
Tom, which
but
ones were on the play? Sorry, which one was on? It was 7, 8, 9 were on the play, or was 10
yeah,
on?
7, 8, and 9, and I
Yeah,
think Tactics was originally
yeah,
on
yeah.
PS1 as well.
All right,
Um,
sorry.
but yeah, anyway, this one it seems to be less popular, which is maybe why I don't think of it as much as the other Final Fantasies on PS1 when
I,
thinking
w-
of PS1.
I wonder which one that is.
I'll have to stay tuned and find out.
Pete, 7.
All right, this one's a little bit of a strange one. I don't think I've ever played a second of this game, but for some reason, when I think of the PlayStation, I think of this game. I don't know why, and that is
Drum roll, please.
Medieval.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
good sleeper pick.
Yeah,
that's a
but
good one.
I just don't know why. So I seem to
Well, we
remember.
had it.
Okay, we did have it.
We did
Yeah.
have it. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if we had it or if Aunt you like borrowed it from a friend, but I seem to remember watching you play it a little.
Yeah, I think
But I
that
don't
was
think.
that was more of a me than you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But do you remember like I don't my memory was that you didn't really get into it, get very far, or I don't know.
Yeah, so I they they reported or remade it like somewhat recently.
Yeah, yeah, a few
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, I bought that but haven't played it yet. So I'm interested to do that. But
I
yeah, I
actually
remember it being tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
think it
actually
was pretty successful, fairly like pretty well regarded.
Yeah.
Yeah, enough where they made
Yeah.
a remaster, a remake of it. I played that a few years ago. I think it was maybe 2 years ago at this point.
How was
But
it?
I'm disappointed to say that I don't really feel like it held up too well.
Mm.
That's too bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I also
It was cool. Like it was a pretty unique game at the time. I feel like when you get different weapons and stuff, and you know. But yeah,
yeah,
uh,
now in this day and age, maybe, yeah.
yeah. It's not
Yeah.
as
I also just
impressive.
remember like the commercial running a lot. I think maybe it was like around the time we like first got the PlayStation, so I was like
Into it.
hyper focused on the PlayStation games commercials.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that made my number 7.
All right. And Tom, you went, right? That was your Final Fantasy?
Right.
9. All right, so now we're up to 6. Um, Tom, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So for this one, I went with Spyro 3: Year of the Dragon.
Not on my list.
I couldn't get Spyro on my list, but I obviously was thinking of him.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the only one here who's a pretty big fan of that series.
Yeah, I never played it. I remember you playing some of the games, but I
Yeah.
never played.
Yeah, this one was cool because it had different playable characters and it just kept expanding on the previous two games in terms of content and stuff. So that's why it was more memorable to me.
Mm. So my number 6 is a huge game for PlayStation that I actually had a lot of friends that played it back in the day. It had a lot of unique quirks and things like that that I'll mention in a second. And I never played it back then, but I played it once the PlayStation Mini came out. and that game is Metal Gear Solid. Um, Despite not playing it at the time of the PlayStation's release, I just had friends that were obsessed with it and talking about, changing the controller into the second port to beat Psycho Mantis and the code for one of the sections on the back of the game, like jewel case or box or whatever. So it was just so much lore regarding Metal Gear Solid when the PlayStation came out, and it's just the game that I think of when I think of the PlayStation.
Yeah, it's definitely a good call.
Was it on
Yeah,
either of your lists?
I didn't put it on my list just because personally I never played the PS1 version. I didn't play Metal Gear Solid 1 until they made that remake on GameCube, which had it had a lot of the same quirks that you mentioned, but obviously not on PS1.
Yeah, I never played it, obviously, but we'll see if it made my list or not.
All right, then what's your number six then?
My number 6 is the Twisted Metal representation I mentioned a little earlier, and that's Twisted Metal 3. So
All
I,
right.
I think Twisted Metal 3 is like one of the worst regarded Twisted Metal games, but the multiplayer was considered to be pretty good. And I remember playing that a lot with the two of you, the multiplayer. Um, I was debating, or debating maybe is too strong a word, but like I was considering Twisted Metal 2 over Twisted Metal 3. But I realized a lot of like my specific memories from the PlayStation 1 games of Twisted Metal come from Twisted Metal 3. So like the intro where Calypso was saying something like about the devil that I still don't know what he's saying, and the Rob Zombie music.
Yeah, that's from two, right?
No,
No.
that's
Oh, it's
three.
from three.
Yeah.
So he says the devil is in all of us, I think. But we thought he said,
Uh,
"What the devil's going on here?"
I don't think we ever actually thought he said that, but
It's
that's a
just
reason.
funny though.
Yeah.
Like
And
an
even
old,
like,
old
yeah,
old
I
man
just
yells at cloud.
yeah. I like I just like Calypso's presence in that game. So like if you remember all the introductions to the levels, like I mean, well, I remember like Washington, DC, the nation's capital. And then he
I
goes,
remember that.
"Welcome
Yeah.
to Hangar 18." And then like there's some other stuff, but that's what I remember.
Yeah,
Um
I don't
and
know.
then
I
like
just yeah.
no, go ahead.
No, no. I wish they would come back out with Twisted Metal, like make it an online multiplayer game. It's like it
Yeah,
just seems
definitely.
right there for them to do, and they just
Yeah,
don't do it. Yet they remake everything else. It's just
I
weird.
know. Yeah, it is strange. Yeah, and even like some of the endings, like specifically the Mr. Grimm ending, which I won't spoil, but I still remember that one. Like, so anyway, so Twisted Metal 3 was ended up being the clear Twisted Metal representation for my list.
Huh?
All right, so now we're moving to our number fives,
Move to
right?
five, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me start because my number 5 is Twisted Metal 3.
Ah. All right. Enough
For
said about that already.
for a lot, yeah, for basically all the same reasons.
All right. My number five. I think this is a pretty unique one. Again, a game I didn't love, but I just think of it when I think of the PlayStation. Um, Cool Borders. Why is Tom laughing?
Yeah, I remember that game
We
definitely.
had that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it was 3 Cool Borders 3 that we had.
yeah.
Oh yeah. So for those who maybe don't know, that's the snowboarding game, right?
It's a snowboarding game. Yeah, I feel like extreme sports and stuff were big back then. So you had
Yeah,
Tony Hawk, you had the snowboarding, all that
yeah.
kind of
Like
stuff.
Kelly
So
Slater's pro surfing, like
yeah, so
Yeah.
like I wasn't huge into any of those games. They were just so big that I can't help but think of them when I think of the PlayStation.
yeah. I can't. I definitely remember it. Remember having it. I can't say that made my even my long list, but that's cool.
All right, Pete, you're five.
My five is the one and only Final Fantasy representation. Final Fantasy VII, of course. So I'm sure you guys are going to be talking about this later down on your lists, but for me, like I was never really, and I still am not into like the big RPGs. So I never played Final Fantasy VII. I actually never played any Final Fantasy game except for X, which is on PlayStation 2. But anyway, so I watched you guys play a lot of hours of it, I remember. And it's just one of those games that even if you don't play, you kind of, or I know the characters and sort of the general story and summons and all that stuff, right? Like, and then also just the the disc case, like the large case because of the multiple discs, like that's
Yeah,
something that I'll always have a memory of.
right. Yeah,
So
definitely.
Final Fantasy VII is number 5 on my list.
All right, that brings us to number four. Oh, Tom, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, so I wanted to go first here because I put Final Fantasy VII as my number 4.
Oh,
Wow, cool. I'm just one step ahead of you every time.
wow. Yeah, yeah. You guys, I thought we were having a pretty like divergent list more than I thought it would, but then now it's starting to match up a little bit, maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Obviously the popularity of this game can't be overstated. I mean, they have like, Cloud and Sephiroth are both in Super Smash Brothers, like for example, as DLC characters. So like, obviously this is super popular, and they're remaking the games now, or the game into several games. But for me, unpopular opinion, but Final Fantasy VII is actually my least favorite of the Final Fantasy games on PS1.
ooh,
Hot take.
yeah.
Yeah, for some reason I don't know. I think like the story was like super confusing and
Yeah, well,
whatnot. So like it didn't stick with me as much as the others. But again, it's like, so popular that it's got to be on the list.
yeah. All right. Pete, you're 4?
Number 4, I'm gonna go back to the demo disc. Um, this game is also kind of front of mind because of the current remake. But even before, like, I was even aware of the remake, this game is just one that always pops into my head when thinking of the PS1, and that's Tomba. So we never owned this game, but I remember playing it on the demo, and I don't know, it's just one of those games. I don't know if it's because it's like the kid with the pink hair and like the pigs, like it just left like a big impression on me. Um, and at the time it was a pretty interesting game. It's kind of like that 2.5D platformer with like, but also has RPG elements. So I don't know. I always think of Tomba when I think of PlayStation.
All right,
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a good
No,
point.
no, yeah, not on my list, but all right. My number 4 is a game that is only this high up because I had friends obsessed with cars and loved this game, and that is Gran Turismo.
I mean,
Um,
I'm so glad you got that on the list because it wasn't on my list, but it's
uh,
like I think it's like the second best selling PlayStation game.
yeah,
So
it's a huge game,
yeah,
and because of the influence of my friends and like having to watch and them play it when we would hang out, um, it's on there. I mean, I got into it a little bit, but it certainly we wouldn't be on a top 10 list, but of like enjoyment for me, but it's certainly on the top 10 on games I think of when I think of the PlayStation. All right, and then I'll start with number 3. My number 3 was actually where I had WWF Warzone. So we already discussed it earlier. Pete had it much further back on his list, but that's where I had it. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go. So this is where I had Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2
Okay.
specifically. Yeah, I mean, this game was huge, as you said, and it just like, I mean, it introduced me to like new bands and stuff.
Yeah, the music's good.
Yeah, it had a great soundtrack, and yeah, I mean, it even like wanted me to get into skateboarding, and I never actually ended up doing that, but like it was inspiring in that way, and I mean, I remember at least watching the X Games, you know,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, and we had like the little like what do
oh
they
yeah,
call them,
those,
hand toys or whatever, the
yeah,
skateboards. Like
those
yeah,
little mini skateboards that you would play with your your two finger, your index finger, and your middle finger. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. All right, so my number 3 was Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Oh, there we go. Getting some convergence now from the
Yeah,
divergence earlier.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
So this is probably like the second most hours I spent, I think, on a PlayStation 1 game, probably, especially if you're counting like single player hours. And it's behind the next game on my list, actually, probably, which is my first. But
Which is your
and the time,
second?
yes, the second game on my list is probably the most
Oh, I
hours
got
I've
you.
spent on PlayStation.
I thought we skipped around. Okay.
That's a little confusing, I know. And yeah, Tom mentioned like the soundtrack. Like, there's some songs that to this day, any literally anytime I hear it, I think of Tony Hawk. So anyway.
All right then. So Pete, why don't you give us your number 2, which would be your first in hours played
Yeah,
game
yeah,
of
yeah.
PlayStation?
So this probably won't surprise either of you. It's probably, a little off the radar from most of our listeners, and that's Triple Play 99.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I remember Alex Rodriguez on the cover. I also always remember like that dramatic intro, and I don't remember it verbatim, but remember it was like a long time ago. People hit a ball with a stick to pass the
Yeah.
time, and
Oh,
then it was like,
that does ring a bell.
yeah,
Wow.
like
Yeah, that was
whatever it
from that
was,
game.
like
Huh.
pastime, whatever it becomes baseball or whatever.
Yeah, that's cool.
I also remember like you remember like the jeers from the fans, and they'd be like overrated,
Yeah.
and then like uh the one of like the broadcasters thing that they would like say like 100 times every game was can of corn, and then they would explain why it's called can of corn.
Right, right, right.
And I also remember just real quick like doing a lot of like just home run derbies, and they had like that stadium that was I guess in space or something, so like the ball would just like fly like 600 feet.
That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do vaguely remember that. I did not have a baseball game on my list, but
yeah. I mean, if it was for us, if it was PlayStation, if it was a baseball game on for PlayStation, it was going to be Triple Play 99.
yeah, yeah. Tom, number two,
For number two, I put Resident Evil 2.
and I was going to say for my number two and one are the top two, but that's obvious. So, but it's
Very
really
good.
two iconic games that I think a lot of people think of when they think of PlayStation, and Resident Evil 2 is my number two as well.
All
That
right,
was
who wants to share why?
yeah, that was I remember I have a good story about this. I remember I knew my parents or our parents got it for me for my birthday. And I wound up like finding where they hid it and opened it up like secretively and put in the Leon disc and wound up got I didn't even get like played it when they weren't home and I didn't get past like that first part where you have to run in the like where it's fire outside before you get into the police station. And then so I put it back real quick and hit it back to where it was. And then when I played it actually for the first time when I didn't have to sneak around and actually got it for my birthday, I started off with Claire and like played it through. So like that's my little story with Resident Evil 2. So but it's also just a phenomenal game. It still holds up today. Um, Tom,
So did you
yeah.
did you have to put the plastic back on the game?
No, I think I was able to. I don't know. I guess they didn't catch that.
They weren't
Yeah,
hip to your jive, like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. All
yeah. I
right.
mean,
So,
for me, Resident Evil 2 is like the best game in the series, so
mhm.
had to pick that one.
All right, so we each have our number ones, yeah, but we'll just briefly go through our honorable mentions, and you know, I have one. It's the Tomb Raider. It's Tomb Raider. I surprised this didn't make my list. I had a friend that would like was not very good at it, and like would just play the first level and then lock the butler in the walk-in freezer all the time, and that was the only thing he would do. But it still was obviously Lara Croft is very iconic to the PlayStation, and the games were iconic, but it kind of just made my. I was never a huge fan of the game, so I think that's kind of why I made my honorable mention.
I'll go next. I had three, but they were all kind of mentioned. So first one was Tomb Raider, as you just said. Um, Next was Tomba, which Pete mentioned earlier. And finally, I put Gex 3, Deep Cover Gecko.
Another Gex.
Yeah,
all right.
all good
Yeah,
options. Yeah.
yeah. I had a handful of games that I was like thinking about. I'll just mention a few that have not been mentioned yet. One is Doom. We had Doom
Mm,
for PlayStation, so it makes me think. One is Mega Man Legends because that game is awesome.
mm.
And, and the third is Oddworld Abe's Exodus. I just remember the commercial.
You
A lot of
love
commercial
remembering those
influence.
commercials. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I love commercials and demo discs.
Yeah.
Good call on Mega Man Legends. I'm surprised that I didn't actually think of
Yeah.
that one.
Because we, unlike the rest of the world, the three of us actually like that game.
Yeah.
Um, all right, anyway, let's go to our number ones. I don't know. It's already been mentioned already. My number one is Final Fantasy VII. So I don't Tom makes a good point. I don't know if it's my favorite. I think it's my favorite, though the story is a bit confusing. But it was just my introduction to Final Fantasy and like RPGs and just that huge world. So I love that and the summons and stuff. I remember playing it like you know to the wee hours of the day at night. So that's my number one when I think of PlayStation.
I have no idea. Oh, never mind. I think I might know what Tom's number one is, but I'll go next. So I had Crash Bandicoot.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm conflating the two games, but I had listed the original. But if the first one we had was two, then maybe I'm thinking of two. But
Yeah, I don't think I
eh.
actually owned the one.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I don't know. To me, like he's the mascot of PlayStation.
Yeah.
To me, when I think of PlayStation, I immediately think of Crash.
Fair
I'm
enough.
surprised
Fair
I'm
enough.
surprised you guys had him so high up the rank.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is what it is.
yeah. All right,
Tom, give
Tom.
us. I think I know your number one based
Yeah,
on
so
comments you made, but
yeah, so my number one is Final Fantasy 8,
there we go.
which is the hottest of hot takes, but this is my favorite game in the series. And like when people ask me what is my favorite game, I usually say this one. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's something about this game that I played it so many times. on the PS1. They're just great. I mean, Triple Triad. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah, it was a complicated game. They had a lot of stuff with the like the trees of your characters, right, and all that stuff. But yeah, it was really good. All right, great list, guys. This was a good discussion. Thank you everyone for listening to Brothers and Boss Battles bonus levels. Ooh, say that 3 times fast. Catch us on Instagram and X at Bros Boss Battles. You can visit our website at brothersandbossbattles.com and check out other bonus level episodes that will be coming along with our regular Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.